Okay. These seats are cozy.
They are.
They're nice. Hello, everyone. Let's talk about AI in search. So I'll let my panelists introduce themselves first, and then I'll go into the questions.
Hi, everybody. My name is Edward Foster. I am the managing partner of search at GroupM.
My name's Ram, and I run analytics and technology for Performics, a Publicis company.
Excellent. So AI plus search equals relevance at scale. Wow, search is broad, right? And that's when I was coming to questions, and we have 30 minutes to talk about this. So we'll get to as much as possible. So let's start from the beginning. How has search changed over the last several years? Edward.
Okay. For me, the biggest change in search has been this additional user data that we've been able to dig into over the last 8 to 10 years. Originally, 1998, when Google really redefined or set the marker for what search is, it was based on website content. So the architecture of the website, the content of the pages, and then added in what other referent websites thought of that content. And that was fantastic. Of course, look at how successful Google is. Being able to then consider the other side of the search, the actual searcher, add in that context, what we know about the searcher, demographic data, their historical searches, location, if you like, and being able to tailor search towards the specific searcher is groundbreaking. As I was doing research for this panel, I remembered a few years ago, Google came in and they started telling us about personalized search. And I thought, oh, that sounded so cool. Whatever happened to personalized search? Well, personalized search became table stakes. Everything is personalized search now. Whether it's me standing in the middle of Manhattan and searching for coffee shop and seeing Starbucks nearby, as opposed to a Starbucks in London or in LA, that's personal search because it's context that Google knows about me. So in response to your question, how has search evolved over the years, bringing in the additional data on the searcher, for me, has been groundbreaking.
I think Edward summed it up really well. And you also brought back some good memories of 1998, the days of shoulder-long hair and floppy disks, like it meant to me. No, but it has changed a lot over the last 2 decades. There's a couple of points I wanted to make in addition to what you said, Edward. One is it has started to reach maturity. If you're tracking the analysts and the research that's being done there, they're getting more and more detailed in cross-channel, how search influences other channels, how it's influenced by other channels. So the breadth of the play that search has in decision-making has expanded, but it has also matured a lot. Second, it has become, for the lack of a better term, a little fragmented, right? You see information searches now distinctly different from commerce searches, distinctly different from news element searches, and each of these search categories, if I may, are starting to follow a different path of influence or optimization. So in addition to general paid search, organic search maturing, and us starting to use better models behind the scene and platforms, there's also categorical distinction happening between search. And now we start to talk about search, subsections of search as different channels. And the interplay of search is a lot larger.
Yeah, we'll go into that a little bit because I think that is incredibly interesting. You were talking about keywords, and I was thinking back when I was doing SEO optimization 7 years ago. It was about keyword stuffing, right? I don't think you do that anymore, right? Google has stated that 15% of searches are new and have never been searched before, right? So how are these search engines, and you've talked about it briefly, both of you actually, how are they layering on the why and the context of these searches to find future intent?
Sure. Couple of answers, and sorry if I start to get a little deep into it. Throw something at me, keep me awake. But I think your question starts to go in the direction of the holy grail of search, right? So bear with me for a second. You can look at all the search data. You can conduct thematic analysis. You can run factor analysis, and that's where I'm going into my work. You can run PCAs. You can do varimax rotation. There's multiple different data science techniques that you can apply to categorically group searches into different domains or factors. That goes into content targeting, or basically making sure that your content is more impactful based on those thematics. But in general, what I'm trying to say is with the ability to mine that data on search, we have better capability of tailoring it to different needs. So for example, if you run all these analyses, if you have an AI engine that is fueled by these data science methods, the way you would render the results, the way you would interact with a user could be potentially different on multiple different domains. That was not the case before. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Edward, sure. I think that it's a challenge to Google, and by the way, it's Yahoo as well. When Yahoo and Bing come in and they talk to us, they're also saying that about 15% of their searches they've never seen before, and which makes me wonder. I think that probably quite a large percentage of those are complete dross and just people mashing the keyboard or misspellings and typos. But nevertheless, that's 15% of searches that those search engines don't know how to respond to. Each of the search engines have invested in semantic technology to be able to best decipher what those search terms are. So they all now have extremely powerful semantic word graphs, so that if you search for Paris, it knows that the Eiffel Tower is connected to that, the Louvre, France, flights to Paris. So the search engines have got that information, and then in future when you search again and maybe you make a spelling mistake, they can make an assumption on what you're referring to. Also added into that is new searching techniques. Last year, Google claimed that 20% of searches on their Android app and their Google app were voice search. The way we search via our voices is very different to how we're searching on desktops. A lot more words, more tail terms. So I think that as voice search becomes more dominant, the search engines themselves are going to want to do a much better job of understanding what those searches are.
Can I add one more point to it? Because you reminded me of an excellent point. You started to talk about thematic extraction, natural language processing, right? Going back to an extension, right? If you think of concentric circles, you've got brand search, then you've got non-branded search, then you've got the outer domain where you're starting to find out ancillary terms that you can associate your non-brand. You can expand that non-branded search term. Now, if you start thinking about using natural language processor and you have a larger set of data that starts to give you an indication that there is a lifestyle change that is about to happen. You're about to have a kid, you're about to get married, you're about to take on a new degree and expand your education, whatever. These thematics, by bringing external data sets, didn't exist before. What does this mean? This basically, to us, we did this for a few of our financial services clients. To us, that means it's a trigger. You're identifying a potential life change event. So we have financial services clients where we work with them and we segment out the different data as to which is the most highly likely customer. And we find that there are certain life change moments. So for example, you're getting married or whatever, that you're more likely to take an action relating to your financial viability in the future. My point here is you've got more data sets that can make search more predictive in nature. You can anticipate that there is a trigger happening and then start to move people down that funnel sooner than relying on them to get to that point and say, I have an action to take, hence I'm conducting a search.
So we're talking about a ton of data, adding complexity, we're talking about future intent as well as fragmentation of searches across multiple devices. It's incredibly complex. But how can companies start tailoring their pages or ads to maximize their results then? Is it impossible with the rise of black box AI and the complexity that we're talking about here?
So Brands need to understand the searcher. And whether they're using paid search and using demographic targeting to make sure that the majority of the clicks that are coming through to them are from the user that they want, and then tailoring their landing page to that user, they can do that. Organic search is a little bit more tricky, although Amazon's been doing it very well for years, where they use a content management system to sniff out the user and then serve the landing page according to that user. So, for example, I own a dog, I like soccer, I like golf. When I go onto Amazon, actually typically 80% of that page is based all around those components. So the key is to understand the user at the other side of that computer and serving the landing page best suited to them.
Anything to add, Ram?
No, I think Edward covered it very succinctly. The one thought that does come to mind, I'm sure most people here have used search extensions, right? If you do, the added domain, and I'm gonna pivot to one of the earlier sessions from this morning, where we saw we saw how AI could drive better outcomes from conversations. So if you're thinking search extensions, and a search extension can lead to a chat or a call, now you're tying it back to content, and you have the ability, in addition to working directly with the CMS or any other system that renders content directly, you also have an offshoot to take search conversational and then use the power of AI to maximize that conversion if your business is such that there is an alternate path to conversion, not just looking at a landing page or consuming information from a website. So it opens up some possibilities.
Okay. So Ram, you started talking about this a little bit ago, and when I talk about search, it's very hard for me not to say Google over and over again. According to net market share, they have 81% of the market. But Yahoo, Bing, they're still around. We're talking about Amazon, we're talking about YouTube. What are these other companies doing? And some companies aren't typical search engines. What are they doing to differentiate themselves? Edward?
Sure. I'll jump in straight onto Microsoft, because for me, some of the most interesting, wider than bread and butter search is coming out of Microsoft and Bing. Cortana specifically is an incredibly powerful personal assistant that digs not just into online assets, but actually into your whole lifestyle, into your Outlook, into your documents as well. Of course, Microsoft have got fantastic experience and legacy in applications, so it's not surprising that they've really dug into understanding how to do document search. I think that Microsoft, off of the back of that, is going to end up steering towards a more B2B search solution. Add in the vast amount of data that Microsoft has access to from their LinkedIn acquisition. It's understandable that Microsoft will know that somebody searching on on Bing might work at, let's say, HP, because it's got access to the LinkedIn data. So when that person goes onto Bing and searches for something like best ink, they're actually wanting to understand who else sells ink, and they're not looking for a tattoo parlor in East Village.
That's a shame. Ram?
I think I'll go back to one of the points we made earlier about search potentially taking on different buckets or verticals, right? That is where, and this is a great question because I get to pull out my 8-ball here, right? So take it for what it's worth. But different search categories will likely evolve differently. And what I mean by that is, if you're talking about searches conducted on Facebook, they're more likely to be tailored toward influencer content, because all of you guys who've used influencer marketing know the power of influencer marketing towards decision making. If you're gonna go to traditional paid search, that may, using rank brain, etc., might give you more relevant information that is content that is informational in nature. When you're talking about commerce searches, their evolution is likely going to be a little dissimilar than Google, because in addition to making sure that the right product shows up, there's also a business on the back end that Amazon is serving. They're also the search engine for commerce searches, but they also have products to offer from people. So the implication of what it means to the inventory, to the different people who are using Amazon storefront to sell their product, that evolution could likely be different. So again, going back to, at least in my humble POV, if you put search in different categories, the evolution across Google, Amazon, Facebook, LinkedIn might likely take a different path.
Do we know if consumers know that I will go to YouTube for video, I will go to Amazon for shopping, I will go to Google for normal information search, to Bing for documents? Do they have that education right now to make that call, or are they just searching anywhere and being driven to these platforms based upon the results?
I'll be brief. The short answer is no, and I don't think it's fair to ask the customer to be able to do that. I mean, I personally don't particularly like to be told, go here for one thing or the other, or what have you, right? That's exactly the opposite of level of service. I think a lot of speakers earlier this morning said about how oversold AI is, and I agree with you. So bear with me if I make an exception for a second here and say, that is where intelligent decisioning systems come in. We're talking about using decisioning systems that find patterns in data, aka machine learning, apply that decision to a real problem, aka AI, to do cross-channel or path optimization. So let's say your real need is, I want to buy this technology product, and so first I want to watch a video in terms of how it works, then I want to go to CNET or another agency or another place, rating, figure out what the professional's opinion is on it, then I want to check my social network to see whether other people are using. The path could be different. I think it's going to be very difficult to try to force people down a path, and that is where cross-channel intelligent decisioning systems can play a role in terms of what the next stage of engagement could be. And when the engines themselves are optimized to an area, so like YouTube for video, Google for information, then I think that's the interplay, at least in my opinion.
I'm just going to expand upon that. In the early 2000s, vertical search engines were popping up, and everyone was saying, oh, you know what, you're going to go to this search engine for finance, you're going to go to this search engine for travel. It never really took off. And I think probably one of the main reasons was that it didn't matter what vertical you wanted, Google was still way, way better than everything else. That is beginning to happen now, and specifically in retail. Some research that we did at GroupM, if you can find a product that should have constant search volume year on year, which by the way, just finding a product like that is a challenge in itself. I think we ended up looking up HD cables. If you can think of a product that should have constant search volume every year, actually on Google, the search volume is remaining constant, whereas more people are using Google. At the same time, if you go onto Google Trends and you search for something like Amazon or Best Buy or Walmart, the search volume is flying up, okay? So one of two things is happening. Either users are completely bypassing Google and going to those retail search engines, or they're going to Google to find those retail search engines. I think that the stat that Amazon pump around is 57% of product searches are now all on Amazon. So we can't force people to go to these specific pages, or excuse me, specific properties for search reasons, but they're naturally beginning to go to them, just like we have been on the high street for the past 50-odd years.
So let's go to Amazon. Let's go to Alexa. I think it fits quite well. And as we're talking about search and potential fragmentation in AI and trying to figure intent, search is going to be ever-present. It's going to be everywhere. So according to the Pew Research Center, nearly half of all U.S. adults use a voice assistant, primarily on phones. Alexa's now in Toyotas soon, then BMW, and then Ford. My daughter 2 years ago, when she was 3, was going to a hotel room asking Alexa to turn on the lights. And I had to tell her about artificial intelligence and how not all rooms can do that, right? So where is the state of voice and visual search right now? And where do we think it's going to go?
I'll go, that's fine. That's fine. You're very kind, Edward. I think it goes back, at least you heard some of the speakers say that. For our perspective, for what we're doing for our clients, as somebody said, this is a decade-long process or long. It could be anybody, but it's not a short process. We are at the very, very top end of what voice search and visual searches are going to be. So everybody is trying to, as marketers, we're trying to maximize the value to our business or our clients in our own little ways. What we have started doing at Performics is we've started to do more thematic analyses, because what I mean by that is search has now gone from a long tail to a conversation. You're talking about paragraphs of conversation, and in order to digest it all and extract the right thematic, that is in some sense needed to further the outcome that the consumer or the end client is trying to have with the brand. So we're trying to do a lot more work around thematic analysis and see where that leads us. At least that's what we're doing. Again, as I said, very early stages. You saw some examples of what voice assistant can do in terms of truly being an assistant. If you want to elaborate that and take it further to furthering a client's outcome in terms of more sales, more transactions, etc., we're very early on, and we're just starting to do thematic analyses.
So you're saying paragraphs, but what about like the shorter piece, incomplete searches, like best Chinese? I could be talking about, I don't want Jackie Chan results. Maybe it's just a Chinese restaurant, right?
So. No, I think you're right. I think in parallel to that, and I think this is a very, very early area of exploration, you could use machine learning to deliver or generate meta content, meta information. That helps serve what the right information is going to be when the voice comes out of your speaker. So I think you're absolutely right. You're spot on. When I say thematic analysis, there's more to it than just the analysis. We're using that analysis and trying to figure out how we can render it in practical ways. So if that thematic is extracted correctly, you could generate meta information that can then drive what is going to be delivered as an output. Again, exploratory. We do have a group dedicated in my team specifically for sandbox research kind of project, but it's a little bit larger than thematic.
Great.
I got 3 things. Number 1, it's not going to be so much or focused on head terms. It's going to be a lot, the head is going to be, if you like, a lot longer. People's search phrase is going to be longer than I think Dr. Ram was also mentioning. Added to that, it's going to be very, very competitive. People aren't able to see 10 results and go on to page 2 on voice search. Those top 1, perhaps top 2 positions are going to be absolute golden. And number 3, voice search is going to be a lot more personal assistant focused, not completely commercial focused. We do probably already. What's the weather today? Where should I go today? So it's going to be a lot more life assistant rather than going on to Google or Amazon because you want to buy the next laptop.
So AI, everything we talked about, is going to make the most relevant information come to us like better than page 2, right? When you talk about voice assistants, always be the top or second result, right? Always the best results for us. But what about on the flip side, right? AI is making these choices. It's not really telling us. That's one of my major problems with AI. Is a lot of it's black box. They're not telling you why things are doing things the way they are. So what is the danger? Could AI be demoting or removing sites entirely with no little explanation for why? What is the danger here?
I don't know if it's a danger, but I think one of the downsides of AI, and I think one of the maybe one of the most unfortunate side effects of AI, is that it takes away the variation. AI gives you the destination. It skips out the journey, and sometimes the fun is in the journey. If I'm using Alexa and I want to know how to make macaroni cheese, I say, hey, Alexa, recipe for macaroni cheese. You know what? However hundreds of thousands of people ask that same question on Tuesday evening are going to make macaroni cheese in exactly the same way. So I think it's a really unfortunate side effect that AI could take away the interesting, fun variation.
Yeah, the lack of discovery to me is sad, right?
Yeah, And of course, it can be abused. If someone's able to cheat the AI and get to the top, then all of a sudden, you know, the Russians are influencing us.
They always are.
I was going to say Skynet takes over, and we go to Alexa and say, Alexa, tell me a knock-knock joke. But I think jokes aside, I think I agree with Edward. I think one of the additional points I'll make on that, so there are certain things that the incremental value of knowing how the decision is made is going to be limited, right? I mean, we're all in business. We're not doing it for academic purposes. So you always are evaluating what is the benefit of that extra detail. But at the same time, the second point, and this is where you actually get to do the knock-knock joke if you don't like my answer, so bear with me. There has been, for the lack of a better term, a demise of probabilistic modeling, right? We've all been so, and it's completely okay. We've been leaning heavily on the deterministic side of the world, the personalization, the one-to-one interaction. I think part of this is also using, if you have to use AI in the correct way, and you're able to summate information and bring back some of the value of using probabilistic information, the decision trees that we saw earlier here, the path analysis, those could just very well run off of probabilistic information. And so the incremental lift that you may get by asking for additional details on deterministic probability path may not warrant the cost. So all that's to say, keep doing the cost-benefit analysis, and that could be a saving grace. Not everything needs to be broken down to exactly there's a reason it's called a funnel. At the top end, there's more people in, and all you're trying to do is guide the conversation to the bottom end. You may not always need to do that.
Excellent. So we have about 3 minutes left. Second to last panel, and I cannot believe anyone did not bring up GDPR. Right, we're 10 days away. So I'm getting to the point, right? So in April, Google's head of search and AI went to Apple. Apple's Tim Cook, the CEO, stated that the hire, this is verbatim, John shares their commitment to privacy and their approach to making computers even smarter and more personal. So that's interesting. So he's talking about privacy, he's talking about computers making smarter and more personal, but with more privacy, right? So does Apple believe that AI is potentially the solution for GDPR and the potential lack of PII being shared? What are your points of view?
I think I'll lean on my previous answer. There are certain things that, now, I don't particularly love the idea of partner ID and unique identifiers disappearing from my log file and replaced with zeros after May 25th. I just don't. I feel like a pig in the mud when I'm crunching with my numbers, so don't mess with that. But that is a reality, it will happen. So I'll fall back on my previous answer that this may be one of those things where, whether it's Apple or any other company, they will probably lean back on some form of probabilistic and non-deterministic modeling to further fuel AI.
I think that marketers are going to have to lean back on AI because of user IDs not being shared by the walled gardens. I don't think marketers are going to be using AI rather than one-on-one marketing out of choice. I'm not convinced that it's because we're all suddenly moral marketers. I think that the walls within around the walled gardens are getting substantially higher, and that's why we'll end up using probabilistic models.
Okay. Questions for the crowd?
One question.
One
actually.
question.
We're running a little over. Back here. Oh, just tell us who you are, where you work, please.
Paul Disney. So my question is around the shift to voice insertion. How do you think the platforms are going to balance sort of the need for these assistants to be right or correct with making a recommendation and taking on that recommendation as their own or their assistant's recommendation when it comes to paid search?
Paid search.
So today they can kind of have their cake and eat it too with putting the sort of right results as well as some promoted results. How do they get to balance that?
So you heard conversations earlier about training Watson, what have you. A true AI system, one of the biggest costs in putting a true AI system in place is the amount of time, resources that is spent in training that AI. So for the most part, so like what we do is we use our media experts, not just math people like me, we use a combination of media experts and algorithms to train the system so that the scenarios that you're explaining are minimized. Second, exceptions or type 2 errors will always happen. You search for something, you got the results that are not germane, and if you build the system right, that will take into account. So if you're running off of a neural net, your nodes or the weights on the nodes will readjust for every failed path that you're having. So the long way of saying that is take the time to train the system, and you still have type 2 errors that should correct itself over a period of time. If not, there should also be a moderated input trying to look at what exceptions are happening to the path.
Yeah, I get your answer from a technical standpoint. I'm more asking the question around, I think, how does the paid search industry evolve? And so how does, today you can buy those impressions, those search terms. How does that, when 100% of search is in these voice assistants, how does that happen? What happens then?
You want me to pick this up? Yeah. Okay. So if a user searches for an ambiguous search phrase that could have double meaning, is that your question?
Yeah, ambiguous or subjective.
Okay. We have that problem now. Anyone going onto a search engine and searching something with two possible outcomes, we already have that issue. As search marketers, we can hedge our bets by understanding what a brand's perfect target audience is and bidding and using audience signals to bid up to that user. At the same time, and I think it was a couple of months ago, Google launched multiple snippets in their search results to catch exactly that challenge. I thought it was a little bit of a cheat. I thought it was a bit of a sidestep. I would have liked to see Google be a bit smarter to try and understand exactly what that user was looking for, rather than giving two answers. But Google launched those multiple snippets exactly for a scenario when a user uses voice search for something and Google can't understand what they're perfectly looking for.
Unfortunately, I think we gotta forego the rest of the questions, but Ed, I'm sorry, Talis, Ed, Dr. Ron, thank you guys very, very much. If there's any further questions for them, you maybe take them outside. Thanks.